It was around some 5 years ago that for the first time I come from Israel to Riga, to the cemetery, to see the grave of my mother, and I hesitated. Maybe I wouldn't find it. A lot of time passed by. I was a child of 12. So I went more or less in the direction, and all of a sudden I saw it. This small stone, the grave, like my mother itself. It symbolized this miserable part of our life. My father was arrested in 1956 on a false accusation, as it happened with the Jews under Soviet regime. He was in prison, he went in a prison. My mother was broken. He couldn't withstand the injustice of the Soviet regime. He trusted the Soviets, and all of a sudden it happened. So she went in a hospital, and then she left us all together. Okay, as a child, what can I remember, and what a child understands in death? And I remember only one moment of this sad day, people saying Kaddish. I was overwhelmed with the words. I couldn't understand them. I thought there's something sacred, really, that is a prayer that is going to the heaven. And I promised to myself that the day will come and I will know the words of this strange prayer and I will be able to say it. שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזור הרקיע מזהירים לנשמת אמי ולתי חיינתה בת נחם יוסף בת שינה רבקה שהלכה לעולמה. בעבור שבלי נדר ניתנת צדקה, ביד הזכרת נשמתה, בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתה. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן. So it is my home place, number 18. Now it is Elizabeth's. That my time it was Kirova. On my right hand, 3 windows over there on the 3rd floor. It's mine, of my family. That I stayed since my childhood up to the day of the arrest. And what was famous and special about this place was it was a museum of a famous Russian revolutionary, Lenin. There was a big plaque saying that Lenin, the famous head of a communist party, the Bolsheviks, had here a session, underground session, in 1903. A friend of mine told me, finally, one day they will remove the plaque and put another plaque that there was a family Mendelevich living and having and running an underground Jewish group there. They removed the plaque of Lenin, but still not having my plaque. And it was a good building in a good place without Jews, without any connection. So, in fact, you can imagine in one single house, one single family, not Jews around, without any concept to belong to a Jewish nation. And all my family, it was my Jewish nation. And my homeland, indeed, was not the area around, only my apartment. It was mine. All other was far away. And then in the morning, we would go over the street to the high school, which was not a Jewish one. Only some Jews there, you know. I was alone, isolated, never meeting Jews, until I discovered this underground Jewish movement, joined it, and then, only then, I understood the meaning and the pleasure to be a part of my Jewish nation. After my father was released from Soviet prison, he was a broken and ill man. He couldn't work. And my mother passed away. So at age 16, I decided I have to support my family. And I went to work in a factory as an assistant of a carpenter. And in the evening, I would go to this high school for so-called working youth. It turned out, for some reason, it became heavily populated with Jewish boys and girls, and I enjoyed it. For the first time, we met for normally we hardly could we meet in this big city of almost 1 million of citizens that time with a small group of Jews you can never meet. Then I met them, and then during the lesson some of them start distributing some underground materials, Jewish materials, telling about Holocaust, about Jewish revival, whatever. It was very interesting. So imagine me sitting during the class, listening with one ear to the teacher, and having under the table underground verses about the Jewish nation. One day, in the classroom, a friend of mine announced, "Friends, we are not studying today." Why? For it's a Jewish New Year. I thought, what a New Year? It's October. Normal people have it on December. He told, no, it is Jewish one. What, Jews have a different New Year? I was, somehow not only astonished, I felt embarrassed. It's not enough that I am Jewish, even we have don't have a common New Year as all other normal people. So what to do if you don't study? We are going to the synagogue. Me, to go to a synagogue? I am another man. What I have to do with this religious place? But what to do? Friends, boys and girls, went to the synagogue, and I followed them, and I thought, too bad, not enough to be born Jewish, you have even different holidays. And as a matter of fact, it was the first time that I arrived to this place. Later on, it turned out that it was not by chance. In fact, the former prisoner of Zion that were released after Stalin in the end of the 50s and the 60s decided to meet the Jewish youth, for we were dispersed all over the city, never met, and they looked for an opportunity to meet us, young people, boys and girls together, and they decided on two places. One is a synagogue, and the second one, the place of massacre in Rumbala. So we came here. I was afraid to go to the synagogue, for it was a strange place for me. I was a modern man, never thought about religion. But when I arrived here, it was almost the same. I met a lot of young people here in the street, in a yard, maybe more than 100 young people. Never I met that much, the big crowd like that. So I made friends. We laughed and enjoyed. I enjoyed to be there. And I asked friends, when they will have another holiday. So the answer was, come in 10 days. It was certainly Yom Kippur after Rosh Hashanah. But for me, it has no meaning except of the fact that we can still meet, make friends, and enjoy. And it went on from one holiday to another, from Yom Kippur to Sukkot, then Hanukkah. So it is how I got involved in the Jewish life here in Riga, and I believe it is what saved my Jewish life. Being in this high school in 1963, I got to know that some Jewish cemetery is being rebuilt. So I decided I have to come. Nobody followed me. I was alone. It was a long way by a bus. And when I stepped out from the bus, I looked around. The scenery was somehow different. There was no cemetery. I felt that they simply pulled my leg. I was very angry that I lost my time for nothing. And all of a sudden, I saw among the trees some people moving. I looked at them, they looked Jewish. So I start running through the field. There was a field here around. Start running through the field, and like I heard a voice from heaven would tell me, Yosef, now it's a new page in your life. When I arrived, really there were Jews, but I couldn't still understand where the cemetery. There was some piles of sand, and people there, some maybe 10 of them or 20, would collect the sand with their hands, put in all kinds of vessels, and moving it to another place. So when I followed the people, looked to the place, then it would spill down. It was a long trench, and there were some pieces, small pieces of human bones. Then I understood. It's a cemetery, not a simple one. It's a place of massacre. Later on, people told me that here on Hanukkah, before Hanukkah 1941, some 25,000 Jews were killed. You looked around, 25,000 people. It's that much in this small place. So I saw more trenches and more trenches. It was terrible. I felt I have to stay there. This yellow building used to be drafting bureau of Soviet Army. I am connected to this place. It happened that in the end of the 60s, me and my family applied for permission to leave. And when I come to see the officer in the office to explain why we are repeatedly being refused, he told me, "You're a young man. What we don't understand, the moment we send you to Israel, you will be drafted to Israel army, and you'll fight against our brethren Arabs. In no way, we don't send supplements for our enemies. Israel is our enemy." And then he looked at my whatever case, and he told, "Oh, you are studying in a university, so accomplish your studies, and you will build communism. Now go away. Forget about going to Israel. You will die here, but before you will build communism." So when I was out from his office, my conclusion was obvious. I will never accomplish my studies. I will never build their communism. And I stopped going to studies and tests, whatever. But I forgot a very important detail somehow, that if you don't study in university, you should be drafted in the army, exactly as this man told me, not in Israel army, certainly in a Russian army. So only soon after that, I was summoned to this bureau, this one building. I understood that it's so. You know, I'm like an energetic person. I make decision, not sometimes figuring out what will be the consequences. Exactly the case, you know. If they draft me to a Russian army and I will got approached to their secrecy, they will never permit me to leave. So I thought I have to do something special. I remember myself going around in a room in the evening, at night, feeling that I have to do something. I have to sacrifice. What can I sacrifice, you know? And then it was became obvious to me that it is what I have to do. I told to myself, Josef, you are underground class in Hebrew, in Jewish history. You are teaching people go to Israel. What's the reason to go to Israel? Simply change the geography from Latvia to go to Israel. Certainly, going to Israel would mean to come back to your roots. And your roots is Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, means the religion. So I told, if you are teaching other people, why you don't live up your principles? But I hesitated. What? I will become religious? It's a sacrifice. And then I come to the decision. I stood in the center of this room and promised. I told, God, if you exist, help me out from Soviet army. And if I am out from Soviet army, I promise you, I will yours. Next morning, I come to this building, and I couldn't expect what will happen. So the officer was very polite, a Russian captain, maybe major, I don't remember. And he asked the first question that I was not ready that it will be the question. He opened my folio and he told, okay, you studied, you're almost finishing your studies in university. All of a sudden, you stopped your studies. I was not prepared for that. What I would say that I'm willing to go to Israel, certainly he will send me far away to serve in the Russian army. And then I saw in his back, in his window, there was maybe in the backyard, there was a tree. And on the tree there was a small bird. I thought, okay, the God is already helping me. I told, see officer, this small bird, it is free. And then I thought to myself, what, I'm crazy to say that I am not free, you know. And I changed the approach. I thought, see, I was born, I graduated from a high school, then I was admitted to university, then I accomplished my studies, I will become an engineer, I will marry, everything is set in my life before I made any decision. So I would like to start it again. And then the officer was confused and told, what, you would like to become a bird? Yeah, certainly, sure. And they told, oh, yeah, you have mental problems. They have sent you to a mental institution. For certainly, they don't need a soldier that would like to become a bird. So the officer in the drafting bureau, the Soviet officer, decided that a man that dreams to be a bird cannot serve in the Russian army, and sent me to this mental institution that still exists. And I stayed here for a month. I wouldn't say that it was the best time in my life, for I was afraid of crazy people, you know. They behave almost normal. All the time that would dance and sing, except of me. I sat there in a corner. I was afraid of them, or they were really crazy, not me. And I read this book, this thick book of Homerus. So imagine the doctor entering the room, looking at me and them, who would think is really ill. I believe it was me. And then they would ask me all kinds of different questions. I decided I will behave normally, for I don't know how an insane person would behave in a circumstance. I was normal. The only questions that they would ask me, don't you feel you are being watched and followed? I thought it's for sure. For at that time we were members of the underground Jewish movement, and we were bothered that maybe we are being followed by K. g.B. After a while, after spending the months here in this building, there was a commission, and the doctors told me, you can serve in the Russian army. Too bad, you know. And then I was glad that it was really an achievement. It was what I dreamt about. But then he told me, but you have to stay here. We shall treat you medically, and you will finally become sane. I was afraid, you know. Imagine, I thought, better to be in Russian army than to be in madhouse. I thought, no, in no way, you know. You know what? I am ready to serve in the Russian army. I am normal. I was not aware of a small detail. If a man declares that he is normal, certainly he is not. So it is how I was out, and I went from here directly to a synagogue to become Jewish. When I come in the beginning, there was only a small group of older people that initiated it. But step by step, people start coming. We would work on Sunday. The whole place was full with young people, boys and girls. And it was one of the reasons to start this reconstruction, to meet people. Here on the graves, people met. My sister met my friend and they married. And happened. The place of death became a place of life. And this song sings, Am Yisrael Chai. So it was a very outstanding way of reconstructing the cemetery. And there was a certain survivor, Mrs. Michelson, that told us exactly how it happened. And she pointed, I believe it was this grave, that was a children's grave. For the Nazis would take the children at the last moment from their mother and kill separately. So one grave, another, and all around much more graves. A lot of effort was invested in it to build it, but people come. And finally we got it. We had the gardener, Kalman Phrasus, that take care that it would like a real cemetery. And by chance he got like a small tree. I don't know how it is in English. It's Russian. We call this bereza, a white tree, very specific to Russia. And he told me, plant it here. So it is my tree. That time it was smaller than me. Now it's that high. It's still growing. And I think it symbolizes our life, that on the place of death, we are able to start a new life. And many times I ask myself, why the Soviet government wouldn't invest itself in building this memorial place? And the answer was obvious. Memory. They tried to assimilate us, to make us forget that we are Jewish, and we felt different. We felt we would remember. We wouldn't forget. It was our struggle against the power to remember and to tell other people, remember, don't forget. We are Jewish. I was born after the Holocaust, but the Holocaust was naturally a part of my life. To begin with, the factor that the bigger part of my family was massacred during the Holocaust, not specifically here in Riga, in Dvinsk, still in Latvia. We lived in the area close to the ghetto. So people would say, here was this, there was a Judenrat. Like going from the school home, you went through the territory of ghetto. But still, we didn't have the concept of a Holocaust. We did know specific cases. It happened this and that. Only later on, when I became involved in genuine Jewish matters, coming to Rumbula, I got to know much more about that. And specifically, the story of Janis Lipke that saved a lot of Jews. More important for me is the meeting of with this brave man that I met him around 1965 in the forest of Rumbula, for he would come to support our efforts to rebuild the Jewish cemetery. And then I got the concept of a man that can stand against authorities, against the power, not being afraid. Imagine Janis Lipke, man alone, a Latvian, against the Nazis. He was not afraid. And somehow he was my teacher in a courage. When you are doing something human, for human beings, you shouldn't be afraid. A human being, one can oppose and fight in his ways against the power. It was a very important level of my development as a fighter for Jewish freedom. In 1966, me and my young friends started an underground Jewish organization to educate our people, to know that they are Jewish, that they have their homeland, they have to go to Israel to teach and Hebrew. So to have a legal organization, you need a weapon. Our weapon was knowledge and books. It was hardly to get. And then we got one book. It was like a translation from French to Russian language. Goliath is fighting against David. You know, a beautiful book about the war of independence. But how to multiply it? We bought finally printing machine in a shop which was not that easy and very expensive. I remember up to that time it was 135 rubles, Soviet rubles. It was an engineer's salary for a month. Anyway, we students come together, put together the money, bought this printing machine. Another problem was where to print, you know. For the printing machine makes a lot of noise. I could do it at my house, but I was afraid of my father, for he spent time in a Russian prison before, and he could easily understand that it is penal. I may be arrested for that. So I was more afraid of my father than of police or K.G.B. And finally, my friend Boris found a solution. He rented like a farmer house like this one, a small farmer house in a forest outside. It was beautiful. For if even you make the noise printing, you know, I put under the printing machine a pillow that it wouldn't make too much sound, but it is all around, no people around, so you can sit and print. So I took free time from my work for a month. I sat there in this house all alone, and from the morning up to at night, with one finger, I couldn't print with all the fingers. With one finger, I would print. There was almost 300 pages, you know. It took a whole month to print it, and in between, you know, there was no shops around. I never cared of my health, but finally I got hungry. So I went out from this farmer house, and there was a lot of berries in it. So I started collecting berries and eating. When I full my stomach, I went back and I continued to print. So imagine me sitting there and printing with one finger 300 pages, day after day. When each time it was immediately after the 6-day war, I felt it is my tank. I am shooting my bullets against the enemies. I am fighting myself. It's my war. Finally, in the end, I got the all copies. We got some 11 copies of the book. Beautiful, you know. Another problem is to whom to give it. For everybody that would see this kind of so-called book, some is that self-made books, would be afraid, but it was obvious it is illegal. You know. I found a friend that I met in a synagogue and later on in Rumbola. He's a good, clever boy. I decided I'll give him read the book. He accepted. So later on I come to see him and discuss and maybe involve him in more activities. I knocked at the door. Instead, his mother went away outside from the door. It was a big building, some 6 floors. And she, having the book, threw it in my face and started yelling, "What you think? What you are doing with my son? We are loyal Soviet citizens. We are not interested in this kind of literature." And she shouted that everybody could hear, to know that everybody of neighbors has to know that they are loyal citizens. What about me? I could be as well interested. He has no interest. It's my business. So education, as you know, never is easy. And it took time, you know, to find people that may be interested. Then we established undergrad groups, Ulpan, to learn Hebrew, to learn Jewish history, and then another group in different places. Finally, after 3 years of intensive effort, this place was rebuilt. We had already the stone over there, and for the first time in the Soviet Union, it was written in Yiddish that they are for the victims of Nazism. One day, when more or less all the scenery was accomplished, the leaders of the project, not me, decided to have a memorial gathering. People come, hundreds of them, all around in the trees. I believe it was the biggest illegal manifestation in Soviet Union in those years. It was 1966. And then there was certainly police, militia, K.G.B. people, but what could they do? prevent us. They can prevent people to memorize their dead people. So people come and say El Mularachim here on the graves in a Kaddish, and then people spoke. And I was one of them that got permission to speak. I was very excited. I was a young boy, like 19 years old, and I was a speaker. I spoke to hundreds of people, you know. It's me. And I told friends, look what a miracle happened to us on this spot. When we come, it was bare place, fractures. We come to help dead people. Now I told we understand that the dead people helped us, for they make us connected to our history, to our past, make us again alive. And then I told, listen, what the dead people are whispering us out from the graves. They say, never forget, don't stay anymore in the cursed land. You have your homeland, Israel. And I told in Hebrew, Lech Lecha, it's their order. Lech Lecha, go to your homeland. So when being arrested in Leningrad airport, in fact, Smolny airport next to Leningrad, and brought to interrogation to Leningrad. Later on, we were removed to Riga for the main activity that I started since 1964, were in Riga, building these underground groups and organization, and even preparing a hijacking. Everything was in Riga. Specifically, they were interested in the declaration for before leaving to Leningrad. I felt that if we may be killed in the airport, or maybe somehow arrested and nobody would know what is happening with us, we have to leave over a document to declare the real reasons of our struggle, that it is for freedom of immigration, etc. And certainly they were interested to find out more about this declaration. And then all the activities, all the underground groups, Rumbele activities, whatever, were here in Riga, so I stayed there. As a matter of fact, this cell is much more bigger than I was in, twice bigger. Mine was very small. But there's some kind of resemblance. From the beginning, they tried to break my will and make me cooperate. And they changed their approach. They understood that intimidating me will never help. I was escorted to a certain officer, Captain Popov, a very polite man. And he told a lot of things, and then he told me, I'm looking at you, you know. You say you are Jewish. You don't look Jewish at all, you know. You are a Russian boy. You got our Russian education. You know, stop talking about Israel. You know, admit you are guilty. We shall not pardon you, but you will get instead maybe 7 years of imprisonment, and back out from the prison, you can become a regular Soviet citizen. So when back to my cell, I start thinking. Living inside in a prison make you forget about step by step. You start feeling that you are a prisoner, and it is your life. Maybe it's the last day, the last month of your life. You have to do something to fight for your freedom, for your life. And then I was afraid of myself. If I start thinking this way, I can be broken. I have to run away from their influence. They say that I am not Jewish. I have to set me being Jewish. And I had an idea. I will cover my head. So I got a handkerchief, and I made knots on my handkerchief, like to put it on the head. And then put it on my head. And when being escorted to my officer, he was angry. He looked at me and he told me, "What's happening with you? You are completely crazy," he told me. "Remove this piece of clothes, behave, you're an educated man." So I told, "Yes, really, I'm educated, but I have a Jewish education. And according to our Jewish education, that much that I did know, we have to cover our heads. So it is, produce me like a yarmulke or something. If you don't have it, I make my handkerchief." And then I told him the whole story about the Jewish nation, creation of the Jewish nation, Moses and Exodus, whatever. He was finally very angry. And he told me, "Josef, you think you are smart? You are stupid. For with this cheeky behavior, you are preparing your death penalty. Think again." And he sent me back to the cell. After my first success with covering my head, I saw that I had invented something else that a religious Jew will do. And I decided I will pray. So I wrote a prayer on a piece of a paper. And then I remember that we have to pray in the direction of Jerusalem. I don't know where is Jerusalem, Here, where is the Jerusalem? And then I remember that there was a book of Daniel telling that certain Jew, some 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, was in some position. He was in Persia, would like to pray in direction to Jerusalem. He has no smartphone, nothing. So he would simply stand in the window and pray. So I decided, I don't know where is Jerusalem, but I will stand at the window and I will pray. So imagine me standing this way, having this piece of paper, praying and looking in the window and asking God, "God, help my nation out from Russian slavery, help my family out, my father and my sisters, and take me out from this terrible place." After a while, the door got open, and guards rushed inside and grabbed me in the wall and told me, "We watch you all the time. Why you stand in the wall, touch the wall, and look at the window? What's the reason of it?" Now it is a window, but that time there were only grates in it. They checked the wall. Maybe you try to take out a brick of the wall like a Monte Cristo and right away. And then they check my pocket. "Aha, you have a secret letter. Now we understand. You try to pass a secret letter to your friends. You have to be really crazy, to think that you can, through the grace, pass a letter." And then they took to an interrogator this piece of letter. After several days, I was escorted again to my Russian friend. It was my prayer on his table, and the translation. Captain Popov was very angry. He told me, "What? You became religious?" He told me. "You've never been religious. Who influenced you?" And I answered, "The God influenced me." So it's so-called exercise yard. But for prisoners, at least for me, it was another chance to try to contact my friends. You try to listen. Maybe it's your friend. Maybe there are two friends speaking, and you can maybe find out what's the state of their mood. And then I decided I have to strengthen my friends. And I start thinking the national hymn, Atikva. And they answered. I understood. My Jewish friends are over the wall. We sang it and enjoyed for a small while. Then the officer over there was angry and told, "Stop it, You're not possible. You have no right to communicate." Another time, there was a feather, a bird feather, flying very easily. That time, the wall was open. Now, see, the bricks, they closed it. But then it was a possibility like to play with a feather. I would blow it, and it would flow over, and the friends returned me the feather, I was that glad. It's like I'm embracing a friend, like it's very close to me. And I felt we continue a struggle, we are alive, we shall succeed. Shir Hamalot, ממעמקים קראתיך אדוני, אדוני שמע בקולי, תהיינה אוזניך קשובות לכל תחנוני, עם עוונות תשמור יה אדוני מי יעמוד, כי עמך סליחה למען תברא, קיוויתי אדוני קיוותה נפשי, ולדברו אוכלתי נפשי אל אדוני, משומרים לבוקר, שומרים לבוקר, יחל ישראל אל אדוני, כי עם אדוני החסד והרבה עבדות, והוא יפדה את ישראל מכל עוונותיו.